If you were under the impression that the United Kingdom couldn't possibly get any stranger or more dystopian than it was last year, you might want to pour yourself a strong drink and sit down for this one. Today we are taking a tour of a country that seems to be preparing for a Soviet-style future with significantly more enthusiasm than it has for its own economic recovery or structural reforms. We have a government tightening its grip, promising us a stronger state that you can now feel creeping into every aspect of your life, from the screen in your pocket to the pint glass at your local pub. We are looking at a cabinet that wants to ban social media for teenagers, while simultaneously handing the keys to our national defense over to a satellite system literally named Skynet. And no, that is not a joke I wrote, that is the actual reality. We have got Turkish gangs running parts of London with military-grade efficiency, a prime minister busily purging his own party rivals to avoid competition, and a legendary British car manufacturer suddenly realizing that the green agenda does not actually keep the factory lights on. But stick around, because the story about how we are sleepwalking into a digital Iron Curtain is something you cannot afford to miss, and I have saved the most twisted, unbelievable part for the very end. Before we dive into this rabbit hole of absurdity, I have a small but vital favor to ask of you. We do the heavy lifting here, digging through the noise, the spin, and the propaganda to bring you the raw reality. And let me tell you, that is not an easy job in this current climate of censorship and shadow bans. If you value truth over comfortable lies, please destroy that like button and subscribe to the channel right now. And if you have the means to help us keep the lights on, consider supporting us through YouTube Super Thanks, or by sponsoring the channel directly. Your support is the only thing that keeps this independent voice alive against the algorithmic machine. Now, let's peel back the layers of this mess. Let's start with a vision of the future that feels uncomfortably, terrifyingly like the past. There is a column in the Daily Telegraph today that reads less like political analysis and more like a retro horror script for anyone who actually remembers the Cold War. The argument is stark. As Prime Minister Keir Starmer pushes for this empowered state, we shouldn't be looking to modern China for a comparison, but rather to the late Soviet Union. It sounds absurd, perhaps even hyperbolic, until you actually look at the details of daily life. We are being told to prepare for a world where the British pub, that absolute cornerstone of our culture and community, vanishes under the crushing weight of taxes and regulation, replaced by illicit home brewing and moonshine. They are predicting a return to kitchen culture, a phenomenon well known in the Eastern Bloc, where you publicly say the approved slogans to keep your job and your social credit score intact, but you only speak the truth in hushed tones with close friends in your cramped kitchen, while the radio plays loud to cover your voices. The article even suggests we might see the return of state-run canteens, reminiscent of wartime feeding centers, because apparently the free market is just too dangerous for food distribution. It paints a picture of a society surviving purely on black humor, cynicism, and misery. There is this old Soviet joke the author recycles, and it fits modern Britain so perfectly it hurts. A man gets arrested and his cellmate asks, "How long did you get?" He says, 10 years. The cellmate asks, "What for?" The man says, "For nothing." And the cellmate shakes his head and says, "Don't lie to me. For nothing you only get 5 years." That is the level of administrative absurdity we are approaching, where innocence is no defense against the bureaucracy. We are looking at a society where encrypted data and samizdat-style pamphlets become the only way to communicate freely because the internet has become a trap. It is a grim forecast, but when you look at the legislation coming down the pipeline, you have to ask yourself, are we already there? Maybe we should start queuing for bread now just to get the full, authentic experience early. This philosophy of the strong state naturally extends to the digital realm, where the government seems to think it can parent your children better than you can. Shabana Mahmood, the Justice Secretary, has come out swinging, stating she sees serious grounds to ban social media access for anyone under 16. Now, on the surface, they tell you this is about protecting the children, about mental health, and we all know the toxicity of these platforms is real. But there is a catch, and it is a big one. She insists the police won't be the ones enforcing it, claiming they should focus on real crime rather than cultural wars or online policing. Yet, the House of Lords has already nodded through a playful amendment for this ban, and it is gaining momentum in the Commons. It is the classic bait and switch. They introduce a mechanism for total control under the guise of safety, but once the infrastructure for a digital firewall is built, who really holds the keys? Because nothing stops a determined, tech-savvy teenager quite like a "please confirm your age" checkbox designed by a bureaucrat. While the government obsesses over what teenagers are watching on TikTok, there is a much bigger, much more dangerous game of dependency playing out in the corridors of Whitehall. We are seeing growing panic within the government about our reliance on the United States for defense, especially with the unpredictable nature of Donald Trump looming over the Atlantic. The spotlight is on a multi-billion-pound project for secure military communication satellites. And yes, they actually called the project Skynet 6. You literally cannot make this up. It is like they have never seen a movie or read a sci-fi novel in their lives. We have a tug-of-war between the American giant Lockheed Martin and the European Airbus. Officials are terrified that if they give the contract to the Americans, a shift in Washington could leave Britain's defense systems blind and deaf. Airbus is warning that losing this contract could cost Britain 10,000 jobs and billions in revenue. It is a choice between strategic autonomy and political subservience. I'm just waiting for the moment the satellites become self-aware and decide that the real problem with the UK is the people running it. And while our leaders argue over which foreign power should build our military satellites, the situation on the ground here is getting visceral and ugly. In East Sussex, thousands of people took to the streets to protest after the government secretly moved dozens of migrants into a former military camp under the cover of darkness, with plans to house hundreds more. The locals are furious, not just about the migration, but about the deception and the lack of transparency. And what is the government's response? Massive police spending to guard the camp. We are talking about millions of pounds just to manage the perimeter. But here is the contrast that really stings. While police are arresting 60-year-old grandmothers for speaking out in Sussex, entire neighbourhoods in London have effectively been surrendered to organised crime. Apparently, pensioners with placards are the real threat to national security, not the guys selling heroin. If you want to see where the state is actually failing, look at North London. We are seeing reports today detailing how Turkish criminal networks have carved up areas like Tottenham and Hackney. These aren't just street gangs. This is organized mafia activity involving heroin trafficking and the importation of heavy weaponry. We are talking about Springfields and other firearms flooding in from Turkey. The police admit these gangs are the main source of illegal guns in the capital. They have seized over 100 firearms recently, but the locals live in absolute terror. They don't talk to the police because they know the police cannot protect them. So we have a government that wants to ban your tweets and regulate your conversations, but seems powerless to stop armed cartels from turning our capital into a shooting gallery. But don't worry, at least those gangsters aren't posting mean tweets, so the government's priorities are clearly in order. Speaking of international law and order, there is a fascinating leak regarding Interpol that exposes just how broken our global institutions are. Russia has been systematically using Interpol's Red Notice system to hunt down political opponents and dissidents abroad. It is a system built on trust, and that trust has been weaponized by Moscow. We have seen this with Bill Browder, the financier behind the Magnitsky Act, who has been targeted repeatedly. The Kremlin uses these international alerts to harass and intimidate, turning a global police cooperation tool into a personal hit squad mechanism. Interpol claims they filter these out, but for activists without Browder's resources or fame, the threat is existential. It is a chilling reminder that international laws are often just suggestions for the powerful. It is nice to know the global police hotline is always open for dictators who want to settle a score. And if that doesn't make you check your watch, maybe this will. The scientists behind the Doomsday Clock are about to update the time, and expectations are grim. We are currently at 89 seconds to midnight, the closest we have ever been to global catastrophe. Between the nuclear posturing, the collapse of arms treaties, and the unchecked rise of artificial intelligence in military systems, the experts believe we are edging closer to the point of no return. It is not just one thing, it is the convergence of everything: climate, war, technology. It feels like we are living on borrowed time, and our leaders are too busy playing party politics to notice the countdown. I suppose when the apocalypse comes, they will just form a committee to decide whose fault it is. But global catastrophe is abstract. Let's talk about the tragic reality of institutional failure right here at home. In a British hospital, a 3-day-old baby, Sonny Taylor, lost his life because the system simply didn't care enough to check on him. The mother went unmonitored for hours. By the time they realized something was wrong, it was too late. The NHS has apologized, of course. They are world-class at apologizing. They promised reforms, but apologies don't bring back a child. It is a heartbreaking symptom of a healthcare system that is cracking under pressure, where protocols and boxes to tick have replaced actual care. If apologies were medicine, the NHS would make us the healthiest nation on earth. But sadly, that is not how it works. And it is not just the NHS. The BBC, our supposed beacon of truth, is having its own existential crisis. The Director General is warning that the corporation is in deep trouble if the license fee model isn't overhauled. He says they need more money, more flexibility, or the BBC will become irrelevant. But he refuses to switch to a subscription model because he thinks the BBC is a universal service. The arrogance is breathtaking. People are cancelling their licenses in droves because they are tired of paying for a service that often feels like it is lecturing them rather than informing them. The current funding model ends in 2027, and frankly, I don't think many of us will mourn its passing. Pay up, or they will send the detector vans to judge your taste in television. That is the business model. In the world of politics, the knives are out, and they are being wielded by the very people supposed to be on the same team. Prime Minister Keir Starmer has made a move that screams of insecurity. He personally blocked Andy Burnham, the Mayor of Manchester, from returning to Parliament. It is a desperate attempt to neutralise a rival who is frankly more charismatic and popular than he is. But this has backfired spectacularly. The left wing of the Labour Party is in open revolt. They see this as weakness, fear of democracy. It is the classic dictator's dilemma. You purge the people who threaten you, but in doing so, you show everyone just how afraid you really are. Nothing screams strength and confidence like hiding from a democratic vote in your own party. Meanwhile, on the right, the reshuffling continues. Suella Braverman has finally done what everyone expected and defected to Nigel Farage's Reform UK. After 30 years as a Tory, she walked out, saying the Conservative Party has failed on migration and failed the country. She is the 4th MP to jump ship. For Farage, it is a coup. For the Tories, it is a slow bleed. But I have to be honest with you, watching these politicians swap jerseys feels a bit like rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic. They move from one party to another, but does the policy really change? Does the competency improve? Or is it just a new brand for the same old careerism? Finally, let's look at the absurdity of enforcement. While French authorities are patrolling beaches to stop British activists from filming migrant boats, yes, banning people from looking at the channel, our own police force has announced new targets. They want to respond to 999 calls within 15 minutes in cities. That is the goal. 15 minutes. In the movies, the sirens are wailing before you hang up the phone. In modern Britain, you place an emergency call and then you wait a quarter of an hour, hoping the bad guy doesn't have a weapon. It is an admission of decline dressed up as a performance target. And in a final twist of irony that sums up our confused times, Jaguar, the car company that pledged to go fully electric, is pivoting back to gas. They realize that the technology isn't there, the infrastructure isn't there, and the customers aren't there. So they are building hybrids to extend the range. It is a perfect metaphor for the entire country right now. Grand promises of a brave new future, colliding headfirst with the cold, hard reality of how the world actually works. Turns out, electricity doesn't actually solve physics or economics, no matter how much the marketing department wishes it did. We are living in a time of double standards, decaying institutions, and political theater. The state wants to know everything about you while telling you nothing about what they are doing. If you want to stay ahead of the curve and keep your eyes open while everyone else is shutting theirs, make sure you are subscribed. Leave a comment below. Tell me, which of these stories made you the angriest today? Was it the Soviet comparison or the Skynet absurdity? I'll see you in the next episode, assuming they haven't turned off our internet by then. Stay vigilant.